picture this. It's the late 1950s, the absolute height of the Cold War.
Right. A really terrifying time to be alive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you are sitting in a room where the decisions being made literally dictate the survival of the human race.
No pressure.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure at all. On one side, you have the United States, on the other, the Soviet Union, and both of these superpowers are just armed to the teeth.
They had enough atomic weapons to destroy civilization, many times over?
Exactly. Many times over. It is the ultimate standoff. And for the entirety of human history up to this point, military strategy was, relatively straightforward.
Yeah, you build a bigger army, you overwhelm your enemy with brute force, and you win.
Right. But suddenly we find ourselves in an era where winning in that traditional sense actually means mutual annihilation.
Which totally breaks the old model.
It really does. I mean, you launch your missiles, they launch theirs, and everyone loses. So the question is, how do you strategize when winning the war means ending the world?
It's a huge paradox.
It really is. Like, how do you operate when the fundamental math of human conflict has just been turned completely upside down?
It's fascinating.
So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. Today, we are taking you into the mind of Thomas C. Schelling, specifically looking at an Ultra Master Edition PDF of his 1960 Nobel Prize-winning book, The Strategy of Conflict.
An absolute masterpiece of game theory.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore how Schelling completely revolutionized game theory. He took this apocalyptic standoff and proved something that sounds, honestly, absolutely crazy at first.
Oh, it goes against every instinct we have.
Right. He proved that sometimes giving up your options is the ultimate power move. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, to really grasp the magnitude of what Schelling did, we kind of have to look at the state of game theory before he came along.
Which was mostly focused on, pure conflict, right?
Exactly. Up until the 1950s, classical game theory and traditional military strategy were deeply focused on what we call zero-sum games.
Zero-sum meaning there's a clear winner and a clear loser.
Right. A zero-sum game is a mathematical representation of pure, unadulterated conflict. In these scenarios, the payoff matrix is perfectly balanced in opposition. Basically, whatever I win, you lose.
So it's like an arm wrestling match.
Exactly. Or a game of chess. Every single advantage I gain comes directly at your expense. If I push your hand down an inch, my position improves by exactly the amount your position worsens.
So there's absolutely no room for cooperation there.
None at all. Our goals are mutually exclusive.
Okay, so in a zero-sum world, diplomacy is basically useless. You just apply maximum force until the other side breaks.
That was the old way of thinking, yes.
But when you apply that logic to a nuclear standoff, the whole framework just collapses, doesn't it?
Completely falls apart.
Because, if we both launch our weapons, I don't win. My game is not your loss. We just both lose everything.
And that right there is the massive paradigm shift. Schelling realized that the Cold War was not a zero-sum game.
He called it a mixed motive game, right?
Yes, a mixed motive game. So, yes, there is intense competition. Yes, there are conflicting interests regarding global influence and ideology and all of that.
But there's a bigger picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hovering above all of that conflict is a massive overriding common interest. Neither side wants to be wiped off the face of the earth.
Right. They both desperately want to avoid mutual destruction.
Right. And once you understand that you are operating in a mixed motive game, the entire foundation of strategy has to change. You can no longer rely on just maximizing physical force.
Because force doesn't solve the problem anymore.
Exactly. You have to rely on what Schelling called interdependent decision.
Interdependent decision.
Yeah.
Meaning, my optimal strategy isn't just about what I want to achieve. It is mathematically bound to what I anticipate you are going to do.
Yes. And your strategy is bound to what you anticipate I am going to do.
So we are just trapped in this massive feedback loop.
It's a psychological hall of mirrors. You are no longer just acting in a vacuum,
Yeah.
You are interacting.
Yeah, you're constantly adjusting.
Yeah, you are attempting to manage the other side's expectations while they are simultaneously attempting to manage yours.
If strategy is no longer just about who has the biggest army, what is the actual currency of power here?
Well, the currency of power completely shifts. Power is no longer defined by who has the most tanks or the largest gross domestic product. Bargaining power becomes the ability to influence the other party's expectations about your future behavior.
Trying to visualize this concept of a mixed motive game, it actually reminds me of maneuvering in a gridlocked traffic jam.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, think about being stuck in a massive, chaotic intersection where the traffic lights have just completely gone out. Every driver in that intersection has a conflicting interest.
Everyone just wants to get out of there.
Exactly. You want to get your car through the intersection first. The person in the SUV next to you wants to get through first. You are directly competing for the same limited physical space.
But you both share a critical common interest.
Right. Neither of you wants a fender bender. Neither of you wants to crash your car. So what do? You don't just floor the gas pedal.
Because that would be the old brute force strategy.
Exactly, and that just leads to a crash. Instead, you edge forward a few inches. You make eye contact, you signal your intent, and then you watch to see if the other driver hits the brakes.
It's this delicate, high-stakes dance of conflict and cooperation.
Right. Which brings up a really fascinating dilemma. If the currency of power is entirely based on expectations, and my goal is to make you believe I won't back down, how do I actually prove that?
It's tricky.
Because I have to admit, when we dive into how Schelling actually solved this, it kind of breaks my brain a little bit. It completely flips conventional wisdom on its head.
It really does. It challenges every single instinct we have about freedom and negotiation. Schelling's most counterintuitive insight is known as the paradox of commitment.
The paradox of commitment.
Right. And the paradox states that you can fundamentally strengthen your bargaining position by overtly worsening your own options.
Wow, by worsening your options.
Exactly. If you can definitively prove to the other side that your hands are tied, like that you literally lack the physical or political capacity to back down,
Then what happens?
then the mathematical burden of avoiding a catastrophic collision falls entirely on them. They're forced to accommodate you.
But wait, isn't flexibility supposed to make you a better negotiator? Why would actively tying my own hands and limiting my freedom make me more formidable?
What's fascinating here is how this solves what game theorists call the credibility problem.
The credibility problem.
Okay, let's look at the payoff matrix. Threats are entirely useless. They're just cheap talk if the other side doesn't mathematically believe you will actually carry them out.
Right, if they think you're bluffing, the threat means nothing.
Exactly. Imagine you tell an adversary, if you cross my border, I will launch a nuclear strike. The adversary calculates the payoffs. They know that if you launch a nuclear strike, they will retaliate, resulting in your destruction as well.
So the cost is total annihilation.
Right. The payoff for you carrying out your threat is negative infinity. Therefore, any rational actor would just assume you were bluffing.
Because nobody wants negative infinity.
Exactly. If you have the flexibility to change your mind at the last second, human survival instinct dictates that you absolutely will.
Yeah.
Because you have options, your threat lacks credibility.
Ah, I see. Because the cost of me executing the threat is way higher than the cost of me just letting them cross the border.
Exactly.
So my flexibility is actually my weakness because it proves I have a safer alternative. I could just back down.
Precisely the point. To make the threat credible, you have to fundamentally alter the payoff matrix by removing your safe alternative. You make your commitment irreversible.
It's like that old historical strategy of a general marching his army across a bridge to face an invading enemy.
Oh yeah, burning the boats or the bridges.
Exactly. As soon as his troops cross, he orders the bridge to be burned behind them. On the surface, it looks completely insane. You've tracked your own men.
It looks like a terrible tactical blunder.
Right. But strategically, you've just rewritten the rules of the engagement. You've communicated to the enemy, hey, retreat is physically impossible now. We will fight to the death because we literally have no other choice.
And suddenly, the enemy, who does have an escape route, has to decide if they really want to engage in a fight to the death.
Right. The asymmetric payoffs shift entirely in your favor.
But, in the modern era, you can't always literally burn a physical bridge.
Right. Geopolitics is a bit more complicated than that.
Exactly. So you use strategic equivalents. You use tripwires.
Tripwires.
Yeah, you deploy a small, vulnerable contingent of your own troops right on the border of a contested ally. They aren't large enough to actually stop an invasion, but if the enemy attacks, those troops will die.
And that changes the math.
It forces your hand. Their deaths will automatically trigger a massive, unavoidable political and military response from your home country. The decision is essentially taken out of the politician's hands.
Or you purposefully delegate authority to someone you can't control, right? Like you give the launch codes to a frontline commander who is publicly known to be a hothead.
Yes, That's another classic example.
You just tell the enemy, look, I can't stop him from firing if you cross this line. Because you appear completely unable to intervene, the enemy can no longer rely on your rational hesitation. You have weaponized your own lack of control.
It is a phenomenal strategic maneuver.
Hmm.
You are basically saying, I would love to compromise, honestly, but the mechanism is already in motion, so it is entirely up to you to hit the brakes.
Okay, that makes total sense when both sides can clearly see the board. Like when you can publicly announce that you've burned the bridge or set the tripwire.
Right. Explicit communication.
But put yourself in a situation where the geopolitical lines just go dark. What happens when adversaries refuse to speak to each other? Or when communication breaks down completely in the fog of war?
That's where things get really tense.
Yeah, how do you manage interdependence when you can't even send a simple message?
That leads us to the concept of tacit bargaining.
Tacit bargaining.
Yeah, tacit bargaining is negotiation without any explicit communication. Schelling theorized that human beings are remarkably adept at coordinating their behavior without saying a single word.
Assuming they share that common interest, right?
Exactly, provided they share that overriding common interest in avoiding a disastrous outcome. We coordinate through signals, through historical precedents, and by anticipating mutual expectations. This is where the archetype of the coordinator comes in.
This actually reminds me of a thought experiment from the book.
Oh, the city one.
Yeah, the Lost in the City scenario. Imagine you and I are visiting a massive foreign city for the first time, say Tokyo or London.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And we get separated in a massive crowd. Neither of us has a working cell phone. We didn't make any sort of backup plan of where to meet.
That's a total nightmare scenario.
Right. If we just wander randomly, the statistical probability of us finding each other is essentially zero. But we don't wander randomly.
No. We try to think logically.
Exactly. I start trying to guess what you are guessing I am going to do, and you are doing the exact same thing. I think, where is the most obvious, culturally significant landmark?
You look for a focal point.
Right. I head to the central train station, or like the biggest clock tower in the main square, operating on the assumption that your logic will lead you to the exact same spot. We converge on a solution silently.
It's pretty amazing that humans can just do that.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What do game theorists actually call that magnetic psychological pull that brings us to the train station?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this phenomenon is called a focal point.
A focal point.
Yes, which the academic world almost universally refers to now as a Schelling point, after him. A Schelling point is a natural salient solution that stands out conspicuously from an infinite number of other possibilities.
He's like an anchor.
Exactly. It acts as an anchor for expectations. In game theory terms, it creates a coordinating Nash equilibrium, basically a state where neither of us has any incentive to deviate from going to the train station, because doing so would ruin our chances of finding each other.
So how does a train station translate to nuclear deterrence?
Well, in limited warfare, a focal point obviously isn't a building. It's usually a geographical boundary, a river, a mountain range, or a specific parallel of latitude.
Oh, like the 38th parallel.
Exactly. When two armies are fighting and communication breaks down, they will often halt their advances at a river. They silently agree not to cross it.
Not because they signed a treaty or anything.
Right, and not even because the river is impossible to cross physically, but because it represents an obvious natural limit. It's a salient boundary that helps both sides avoid the uncertainty of a disastrous escalation. It's tacit coordination in action.
But tacit coordination requires both sides to, accurately interpret the subtlety of those natural boundaries.
Right, which isn't always guaranteed.
And that works for avoiding a minor skirmish. But what about severe existential deterrence? What happens when you are trying to prevent a nuclear first strike and you can't rely on the other side picking up on your subtle signals?
You need something stronger.
Right. How do you make the ultimate threat credible when, as we discussed earlier, carrying it out means your own destruction?
It's the ultimate paradox.
It is. If you try to automate the response to guarantee it happens, you arrive at a concept that sounds straight out of science fiction.
Let's talk about the ultimate mechanism for certainty, the doomsday machine.
The doomsday machine is essentially the theoretical zenith of the commitment paradox. It is the perfect tripwire.
It's terrifying just to think about. Imagine building an underground weapon wired to a network of global sensors.
A completely automated system.
Right. And if those sensors detect a nuclear detonation on your soil, The machine automatically, irrevocably detonates a payload large enough to destroy the entire planet.
Taking everyone down with it. Exactly. There is no human element at all. No president can override it. No general can unplug it. It removes human hesitation completely.
And mathematically, it works perfectly. It creates 100% certainty of a catastrophic payoff for the aggressor. Because the machine literally cannot be stopped, the adversary knows that a first strike is guaranteed suicide. The commitment problem is entirely solved.
But there is a massive flaw here, right? I mean, building a machine that destroys the world automatically is politically and technologically insane.
Nobody would ever actually build one.
Right. No nation would actually hand over their entire existence to a blind computer algorithm. So if you can't build a doomsday machine to guarantee certainty, what do?
This is where Schelling introduced his most terrifying yet brilliant concept. If you cannot guarantee a certain retaliation, you have to weaponize uncertainty.
Weaponize uncertainty.
Yes, you introduce pure, unadulterated randomness into the strategic environment. This is known in game theory as the threat that leaves something to chance.
So the paradox is, the more control I have over my own weapons, the less credible my threat is. I actually have to prove that I have left the outcome partly to chance.
I know it feels completely backward. You would think a guaranteed controlled response is the only way to deter someone.
Yeah, that's what common sense would tell you.
You would think so. But consider the math of predictability. If your behavior is completely rational and entirely predictable, a highly advanced adversary can calculate around it.
They can game the system.
Exactly. They can plan a surgical first strike that perfectly disables your known command centers before you can even rationally decide to fire back. But if your response is randomized, if even you don't know exactly what will happen or when, the enemy cannot calculate an optimal strike.
Because there's too much noise in the data.
Exactly. Think of it like standing on the edge of a sheer cliff, chained to your adversary. Brinkmanship isn't threatening to just jump off the cliff because the enemy knows you don't want to die.
Right. The payoff for jumping is mutual death, so it's not a credible threat. I'd never just jump.
Exactly. Instead, Brinkmanship is deliberately walking closer and closer to the crumbly edge of that cliff. You aren't threatening to jump. You are threatening that you might accidentally slip.
Oh, wow.
Right. By intentionally stumbling around in a high-risk environment, you relinquish complete control. The outcome is genuinely uncertain. A miscalculation, a rogue commander, a radar glitch, the situation could spiral out of control regardless of your rational intentions.
So by proving that you have left the outcome partly to chance, the threat of mutual destruction becomes paralyzingly believable.
Yes, unpredictability creates genuine fear.
You are generating stability through shared terror. You literally chain yourselves together and walk to the edge, just hoping the sheer panic forces the other guy to back away first.
That's a very dark way to maintain peace.
But put yourself in that environment for a moment. You are balancing on a crumbling cliff. Weapons are on hair trigger alert. Retaliation is completely unpredictable.
It's incredibly stressful.
That environment breeds a specific kind of paranoia, which leads directly into what game theorists consider the most dangerous psychological dynamic in existence.
Ah, yes. The reciprocal fear of surprise attack.
The use it or lose it spiral. Let's break down the math of this because it is genuinely terrifying. If both superpowers possess weapons capable of destroying the other's military in a sudden first strike, the logic of survival becomes brutally unforgiving.
It really does.
Imagine you and I are locked in a pitch-black room. We each have a loaded gun pointed at the other. Neither of us actually wants to shoot.
We just want to get out of the room alive.
Right, we aren't aggressive, we just want to survive and go home. But we both know that if the other person shoots first, we die instantly.
And this is where the asymmetric information creates a fatal feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
You know you don't want to shoot. But you cannot be absolutely certain of my intentions. You calculate the probabilities.
And the math is grim.
Very. If you strike first, you guarantee your survival. If you wait, you risk total annihilation. The structural advantage heavily favors the shooter.
So I start staring at your silhouette in the dark. I think, did his hand just move? Is he getting nervous? If he thinks I'm gonna shoot, he has to shoot right now. So I need to pull the trigger first, just to preempt his preemptive strike.
And it escalates so quickly.
And while I'm thinking that, you see me tense up, and your threat assessment just skyrockets. The fear is a complete hall of mirrors. So in this use it or lose it dilemma, the incentive to pull the trigger isn't actually driven by aggression or wanting to conquer the other guy. It's driven entirely by the fear that he's going to shoot first.
It is a devastating tragedy of logic. The spiral tightens exponentially. Your fear of being attacked increases your incentive to strike. The adversary observes your heightened readiness, which increases their fear, which increases their incentive to strike.
The logic just folds in on itself.
Exactly. The Nash equilibrium of this specific scenario is mutual destruction, simply because waiting is mathematically riskier than acting. This raises an important question. How can two enemies possibly disarm when cheating gives a decisive advantage? If I lower my gun in that dark room and you don't lower yours, I have just handed you a decisive world-ending advantage.
Right, a promise just isn't enough in that scenario. You can't just yell across the dark room, "Hey, I'm putting my gun down, I swear," because words are cheap talk. The payoff for cheating is total victory.
Which is exactly why Schelling argued that disarmament cannot be based on trust. It must be based on altering the physical and strategic environment. The only way to break the reciprocal fear of surprise attack is through rigorous, unassailable verification.
Verification, literally changing the rules of the room.
Yes, you have to change the payoff matrix so that waiting is suddenly safer than acting. You do this by basically turning on the lights in that dark room.
Ah, I love that analogy.
You establish mechanisms that make cheating practically impossible to hide. We're talking open skies treaties, weapons inspectors, physically dismantling silos, real-time data sharing.
So transparency is the key.
Absolutely. By increasing transparency, you eliminate the asymmetric information that causes the paranoia in the first place. If I can definitively verify that your weapons are powered down, my fear of a surprise attack drops to zero.
And if your fear drops to zero,
Consequently, my mathematical incentive to launch a preemptive strike also drops to zero. You haven't changed human nature, you know. You've engineered an environment where cooperation is literally the only rational move.
it's all about managing that interdependence we established at the very beginning of this deep dive. You have to recognize that your survival is inextricably linked to the other person's perception of risk.
It's brilliant.
It really is. And it is incredibly easy to look at game theory or payoff matrices or the Cuban Missile Crisis and think, wow, this is fascinating stuff for nuclear physicists and four-star generals, but it really has nothing to do with me.
But it does. That's the beauty of it.
Right. The absolute brilliance of Schelling's work is how universally it applies to human interaction. These aren't just abstract theories for global superpowers. This dynamic plays out during a hostile corporate takeover.
Oh, absolutely.
It plays out when you are aggressively negotiating a salary increase. It even plays out in your living room.
It's remarkably scalable. The underlying math of conflict doesn't actually change just because the stakes are smaller. A toddler throwing a massive tantrum in a grocery store is essentially engaging in a localized form of brinkmanship.
That is such a funny way to think about it, but it's so true.
It is. They are testing your commitment. They are trying to see if your threat of a timeout is credible or if your flexibility to just give them a piece of candy will win out.
They are actively testing your tripwires. They are looking for the Schelling point where you finally just break down and give in. So what does this all mean?
Well, what it means is that at the core of all these interactions, strategy is fundamentally not about imposing brute force. Power is not just having more resources. Strategy is the art of managing interdependence.
Understanding the connections?
Yes. It is about understanding on a mathematical and psychological level how your choices alter the incentives of the people around you. It's about knowing how to make a commitment that is actually credible by removing your own escape routes.
Right.
And it's about communicating intentions even silently through focal points and navigating those complex mixed motive situations where you both want the best outcome for yourselves, but you also desperately want to avoid crashing in the intersection.
Which brings us right back to that gridlock traffic jam, edging our cars forward, sweating, hoping the other driver hits the brakes before the metal crumples.
It's a perfect microcosm of the Cold War.
It is staggering to realize that the exact same psychological architecture, keeping two heavily armed nations from pressing the red button, is what keeps us from fender benders on our morning commute.
It's all connected.
Think about your own life for a second. We spend so much time in our careers, in our relationships, and in our daily negotiations trying to keep all of our options open. We value flexibility above almost everything else. We always want a plan B.
It's human nature to want a safety net.
But if Schelling proved, mathematically and historically, that our strongest negotiating position often comes from burning our own bridges, well, how often are you unknowingly weakening yourself simply because you are desperately trying to leave an escape route open? Sometimes true power is throwing away the key. Think about it. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.